If you were to step into a time machine and land in London during the 1660s, you wouldn't necessarily find the grand, sweeping vistas of a history textbook. Instead, you would find a city that smells of wood smoke, river mud, and intense human desperation. You would find a world of shifting loyalties, religious tension, and the constant, low-level hum of political maneuvering. But if you wanted to truly know what it felt like to walk those streets, to feel the heat of the Great Fire or the claustrophobia of the Great Plague, you wouldn't look to a royal decree. You would look to the private, messy, and incredibly honest diary of a man named Samuel Pepys. Pepys wasn't a king, and he wasn't a general. He was a civil servant, a man of the bureaucracy, climbing his way up the social ladder of Restoration England. When he began writing his journal, he wasn't trying to write a history of the world. He was simply trying to keep track of his life. But because he was a man of immense energy and even greater curiosity, his personal record ended up becoming one of the most important windows we have into the 17th century. To understand Pepys, you have to understand his drive. He was the son of a London tailor, and he never let anyone forget where he came from, even as he worked tirelessly to move far beyond it. He was obsessed with lineage and status. He wanted to be seen as a man of the gentry, a man of substance. This ambition is the engine that drives much of the diary. We see him navigating the complex web of patronage, using his connections to move from a clerk to a high-ranking official in the Navy Board. He wasn't just watching history happen, he was helping to build the machinery of the English state, specifically the Royal Navy, which was the lifeblood of England's growing power. As he rises through the professional ranks, the diary captures the incredible scale of the era's upheaval. We see him through the eyes of a man who is often at the centre of the room. He witnesses the Second Anglo-Dutch War, documenting the tension of naval preparations and the anxiety of a nation at war. He provides us with a granular, day-by-day account of the Great Plague of London, capturing the terror of the streets and the way society begins to fray when death is around every corner. And perhaps most famously, he records the Great Fire of London. He describes the chaos, the heat, the flight of people, and the sheer overwhelming scale of the destruction as the city burned. But the diary is much more than a chronicle of disasters. It is a study of a man's contradictions. In his professional life, Pepys was a diligent, often stern administrator. He was a man of order, trying to bring efficiency to a chaotic naval system. He was a man who understood how to navigate the corrupt, complex world of royal patronage, where favours were traded and bribes were common. Yet, when he retreats into the privacy of his journal, the orderly administrator vanishes. In his private reflections, Pepys is often judgmental, even harsh. He writes about his own failings, his temptations, and his views on morality and sex with a raw honesty that can be quite startling. He was a man of his time, certainly, but he was also a man who struggled with the tension between the person he wanted the world to see and the person he actually was when the candle was low and the door was closed. This duality is perhaps the most human part of his writing. He is not a hero, and he is not a villain. He is a man trying to manage his career, his reputation, and his own impulses all at once. This tension extends into his domestic life. His marriage to his wife, Elizabeth, is a constant cycle of high drama. They have bitter, stinging arguments, often fueled by his indiscretions or her frustrations, only to fall back into a close, affectionate partnership shortly after. Through their relationship, we see the reality of 17th-century domesticity. It wasn't just a series of polite social engagements, it was a lived experience of conflict, passion, and reconciliation. As the years go on, Pepys's professional life reaches its peak. He moves from the periphery of power to the very heart of the English government. He finds himself in the presence of King Charles II and the Duke of York, participating in the high-stakes politics that shaped the fate of the monarchy. He becomes a key architect of naval command, helping to transform the Navy into a professional, organised force. By this stage, the diary feels less like the notes of a climbing clerk and more like the observations of a statesman. However, there is a physical reality that Pepys cannot outrun, and it is this reality that ultimately dictates the end of his story. For years, Pepys had been writing his diary in a complex, rapid shorthand system, a method attributed to Thomas Shelton. It was a way to record events quickly and privately, but it came at a heavy cost. The intense labour of writing in shorthand, combined with the sheer volume of his recording, began to take a toll on his eyes. By the late 1660s, the strain became undeniable. He began to suffer from severe eye strain and declining vision. For a man whose entire life, his professional success and his personal legacy was tied to the act of recording and reading, the prospect of losing his sight was terrifying. The diary captures this vulnerability. We see him struggling with his health, dealing with the pain of bladder stones, and experiencing what he describes as an unhappy temper as his physical strength wanes. The end of the diary is not a grand political climax. It isn't the conclusion of a war or the death of a king. Instead, it is a quiet, somewhat somber surrender to biology. In May of 1669, facing the reality that he could no longer maintain the intense work of writing in shorthand, Pepys made a monumental decision. He decided to stop writing the journal in his own hand. He resolved to have clerks maintain a longhand record of his life for him, essentially turning his private diary into a dictated history. But the transition was never completed in the way he had envisioned. The diary ends abruptly on May 31, 1669. Whether it was the physical exhaustion, the loss of sight, or a loss of the personal impulse to record every minute detail, the result was the same: a sudden, jarring silence. This silence creates what historians call a void of the unwritten. Because Pepys stopped his personal, granular recording in 1669, we are left with a massive gap in one of the most important eyewitness accounts in English history. Had he continued, he would have been in a perfect position to witness and record the glorious revolution of 1688, a period of massive political and religious transformation that changed the English state forever. We have the records of the men who came after him, but we lack the intimate, unvarnished perspective of a man like Pepys during those crucial years. When we look back at the diary as a whole, we see more than just a collection of daily events. We see the intersection of the personal and the historical. We see how the biological reality of a single man, his failing eyesight, his physical ailments, directly impacted the historical record of an entire nation. His eyes literally shaped the limits of what we know about the 17th century. The diary also forces us to confront the difference between the public persona and the private self. Pepys was a man who worked to build a legacy of respectability and professional excellence, yet his private writings reveal a man who was often at odds with the very standards he lived by in public. He was a man of deep contradictions, driven by ambition, shaped by his social origins, and ultimately humbled by his own mortality. In the end, the legacy of Samuel Pepys isn't just that he recorded history, but that he recorded life. He didn't just tell us what happened, he told us how it felt to be there, to be worried about a job, to be angry at a spouse, to be terrified of a plague, and to be amazed by the sheer chaotic energy of a changing world. He left us a map of the human condition, even if that map ends somewhat abruptly, leaving us to wonder what else he might have seen and what else he might have written had his eyes held out just a little bit longer.